It's been about a week now since the Playcallers podcast from The Athletic dropped, and in this video, I'm going to share some of the coaching takeaways that I've had from listening to it. Now, in case you haven't heard of the Playcallers or don't quite know what it's about, it starts just over 10 years ago in the Washington Redskins era when Mike Shanahan was the head coach, and primarily follows the story of four assistant coaches: his son Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, Mike McDaniel, and Matt LaFleur. And it basically covers the four of their stories from then until now. It's 5 total podcasts on the Athletic NFL's podcast site, and they are absolutely incredible. So, in no particular order of importance, other than these are pretty chronological, I'm going to share the takeaways that I took as a coach listening to these podcasts. Starting in episode 1, the first thing that I took away was that when you're pitching plays to whoever the play caller is, you need to know the answers that the defense is going to give you when they try and stop your play, so you know what you need to adjust to off of that. On the flip side, if you're the one calling plays, then make your assistants know the answers to the test that the defense is going to give you. One of the themes that you can see throughout those 5 episodes is that it takes a system. It's not just plays, it's an offense. It's not just a playbook, it's a system. Everything works together: the run, the pass, the play action, and that doesn't happen if you just grab a play from here, grab a play from there, and you try and make an offense out of it. Everything has to work together, and you don't get that just from pitching plays and taking one from here and there. Number 2, if you are lower on the totem pole, then you need to make yourself more valuable to the ones who are higher up on the totem pole. And this idea comes from Mike McDaniel. He said that in the offensive meetings, he wasn't somebody who was going to compete for somebody else's attention. And in those meetings, Kyle Shanahan only really wanted to talk to Sean McVay and Matt LaFleur. So McDaniel, even though he was a quality control coach, became the receivers coach, he felt kind of left out. But he noticed that when it came time to talk about the run part of the game plan, that Kyle Shanahan was only talking to one other person, that was offensive line coach Chris Foerster. So what did McDaniel do? Even though he was a receivers coach, he spent time in the offensive line room, learned the run game. So what happened as a result of that is after the 2013 season, when they all got fired except for McVay and Washington, Kyle Shanahan could only take one assistant coach with him to Cleveland, so he took McDaniel because he knew the whole offense from having made himself valuable to that extent. So if you feel like you're not quite being valued, find some inefficiency somewhere in your coaching staff, something that's not getting done at a level that you could get it done, and make yourself valuable in that way. Number 3, as coaches, it is our job to protect players from themselves. Whenever we have players that just want to go back in the game, they want to give their all for the team, we have to know when it's okay for them to go back in and when it's not. And this comes from how Washington handled Robert Griffin III. We know they were fined earlier in the season for an unreported concussion, and what happened there is RG3 came out of the game only for one play before being sent back in, and the sideline doctor didn't even know that he came out of the game. Later on in the season, RG3 sprained his right LCL. Nothing super severe, but he did miss a little bit of time for it. Then he rushed back just a month later to play in the wild card game, and that's when he suffered his first catastrophic knee injury. He tore his right ACL, his LCL, and his meniscus. And that was all because he didn't want to let his teammates down. They had gotten hot at the right time, and they thought that they were about to make a Super Bowl run. And he didn't want to let veterans like London Fletcher and Santana Moss down, so he played through his injury. Now, to add some context to this was over 10 years ago. And especially when it comes to ACLs, we know the progress that has been made. But towards the end of last season, Kyler Murray tore his ACL. And as of right now, training camp is literally right around the corner. And we still don't have a definitive start date for Kyler Murray. And RG3 was out there at the start of the very next season. So even with all the advancements we've had in the last 10 years, it's still a very short amount of time to go from the playoffs and starting week 1 the next year. And RG3 did it 10 years ago. So it's very imperative that we protect players from themselves. Moving into episode 2, we can give players that have earned it the freedom to improvise. And this comes from future Hall of Fame left tackle Andrew Whitworth, a very well-respected guard in Roger Saffold, and another highly regarded center in John Sullivan. In the huddle, in the middle of a game, they changed the Rams' wide zone run scheme to mid-zone. Whitworth told Todd Gurley in the huddle that instead of reading the defensive end, Whitworth was just going to torque him out and open up the B gap, and told Gurley just to get there as fast as he could. And ever since then, that's been primarily what the Rams have run. The second thing I took away from episode 2 is a huge one. One of the things they talked about was Sean McVay's lack of fear of failure, partially because he was so young as a head coach and didn't know any better. But he said 3 key things that I think you can really add so we don't have to be afraid to fail as coaches. We want to enjoy playing football or enjoy coaching football. We want to strive to be really good at it, and we want to love who we do it with. Now, I think those first 2 things are pretty easy for players and coaches, because if we didn't like coaching football or didn't like playing football and we didn't want to be good at it, whether it's coaching or playing, then we probably need to find something else to do. But the third part to me is really key, and that's loving who you do it with. A good culture doesn't happen by accident. Team building needs to be intentional. As coaches, we spend time away from our families. Players spend a lot of time together, probably more time together with the team than with their families too. And if we don't like who we're doing it with, it's going to make the whole process a lot less fun. Number 3, and the last thing from episode 2, is finding a way to put the best 11 players on the field, no matter who they are. And this comes from Sean McVay's arrival to Los Angeles. He was a tight ends coach in Washington. I believe even when he was the offensive coordinator, he still coached the tight ends. But his coaching background came from tight ends nonetheless. So the prevailing thought when he came to Los Angeles is it's going to be a 12 or 21 personnel offense just like the 49ers have with Kyle Shanahan right now. But what ended up happening is he had Robert Woods, they traded for Sammy Watkins, and then they drafted Cooper Kupp. And so he's on the sideline, and he's got double tight in the game, 12 personnel, or they've got 21 personnel with a fullback. And he's sitting there looking on the sideline at Cooper Kupp saying, this dude needs to be on the field. He is too good to be on the bench. So he adapted his offense to fit 11 personnel because his third wide receiver was better than his second tight end or his fullback. So whoever your best 11 players are, those are the ones that need to be on the field. 2 main takeaways from episode 3. Episode 3 is all about healthy competition. It starts off by talking about Kyle Shanahan versus Robert Saleh for years at 49ers practices. Then it moves into Sean McVay versus Wade Phillips and Sean McVay versus Brandon Staley. And the point is that healthy competition is going to breed success. Now, this isn't uncommon to think of whenever we have like a position battle in training camp, but it's another thing to think about when it comes to coaches. Robert Saleh's initial defense really gave Shanahan some troubles. So what did Shanahan do? He started adding more gap schemes to his run game, and that gave Robert Saleh some troubles. So when Saleh adjusted and brought in the wide nines to box everything back inside, it started giving Shanahan some more problems. So they could have that back and forth, and what happens in part of that back and forth is their systems grow and they become better. The same thing can be said for Sean McVay. On their way to their first Super Bowl in 2018, they were absolutely stifled by the Chicago Bears and their defensive coordinator, Vic Fangio. So when Sean McVay feels like he needs to take his defense to the next level, what's he do? He hires Brandon Staley, a Vic Fangio disciple, and that whole offseason, throughout practices, he was practicing against the defense that was giving him trouble so he could learn how to beat it because the rest of the league was learning how to beat him. So he took the scheme that he had trouble with, brought it in for his defense, and got to lab everything all offseason to figure out how to beat it. And 2 years later, he was getting the Gatorade bath at the end of the Super Bowl. The other thing that really stands out to me in the third episode is something that I've heard Jordan Rodriguez talk about for a long time. I'm a Rams fan. I love the 11 Personnel podcast that she hosts. And what it is that an explosive play at any point in an offensive drive triples the chance that that offense is going to score. So that's why the Fangio defense has become so in vogue the last few years, because the whole point is to not allow explosive plays. Fangio defenses are known for stopping the run and stopping the deep pass. They're going to force you to beat them in the short to intermediate area where they can rally and make the tackle for a 5, 6, 7, 8-yard gain instead of getting beat by a 40-yard gain. The quote from Brandon Staley was, "It takes a lot of 5-yard runs to equal one 40-yard pass." How many times are we on the sidelines yelling at corners, "Don't get beat deep, don't get beat deep"? yet we still have them pressed up and they don't have any help. That's why the Fangio system is really known for having those defensive backs deep, because they're giving their players a little bit extra cushion, some better tools to not get beat deep, and to keep everything in front of them. Quite a few takeaways from episode 4, and the first one is still the prevailing thought of players and not plays. And this is something that I struggle with as somebody who has studied this system for the last couple years and absolutely loves it. But even in the biggest moments, Sean McVay leaned on his superstars in the Super Bowl.
Akers is the back. 4th and 1. Cut. He's going to get it. And more to the 37. Stafford. Caught on the run. Cup. Who else?
Ready.
Comes out of the slot to the right. Looks that way. Fires that way. Cup makes the grab at about the 18. Pass. Cup. Got it. Touchdown.
For the World Championship right here. Aaron Donald's going to make a play.
Burrow to throw for it. He's hit. He flings it away on 4th down. Aaron Donald got there.
Yes! Yes! I knew it!
The greatest of all time does it in the biggest moment of Super Bowl 56.
Aaron! Hey! Come here! Hey, I knew... World champs. Great job. We're world champs. Yes, sir. We're world champs. I knew you would make that play. We're world champs. I knew you would make that play.
So even though the scheme is fantastic and is very known for elevating the players in it, it still comes down to players and not the plays. Number 2 also goes along with the offense, and that is the illusion of complexity. And that's kind of the Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan way of saying, one play 100 different ways. They're going to have a lot of different plays that all look the same, but at the end there's a little tweak. Maybe it's a double move by a receiver. Maybe it's a play action pass off of a certain run action. Everything is going to look like something else so that whenever they figure out what the defense is going to do to stop it, they have an adjustment, a counter to it. Number 3 is something that we still hear in coaching circles, but it's really interesting to hear coming from the professional level, and that's grow where you're playing it. This comes from Mike McDaniel. He wanted to climb the ladder so quick. He wanted to beat Kyle Shanahan's age to offensive coordinator, and what ended up happening is that he felt like he deserved all these things. He wasn't getting them. He had a hole in his life, and he filled it with alcohol. And as a result, he ended up out of the league for almost 900 days. So when he finally got back in the league, he decided that he was done trying to climb the ladder. He was just going to do his job to the best of his ability, and the rest would take care of itself. And look where he is now, head coach of the Miami Dolphins, and primed to make a very deep run next year in the playoffs. The 4th thing I took away from episode 4 was knowing your why, and secondary to that is not tying it to the win and loss record. Number 5 is one that I really like. Don't try and be perfect. Chase being better tomorrow than you were today. Nobody's going to be perfect, but everybody can get better at something every day. That goes for coaches and for players. Maybe I know my scheme a little bit better today. Maybe I learned a coaching point today that I can take tomorrow. Maybe as a player, my hinge block is a little bit better today than it was yesterday. And maybe my kick slide will be better tomorrow than it was today. Chase a better version of yourself every day. Number 6 was one that I found really interesting, and this came from Mike McDaniel. Don't overstate the importance of the play caller. Usually we think that maybe the quarterback is the only more important person than the play caller. Bad play calls become explosive plays all the time, and good play calls or great play calls are stopped dead in their tracks just as often. Maybe the guard doesn't get that 3 technique cut off on an inside zone. Maybe inside zone was the right call there, but the players don't execute it. So don't overstate how important the play caller is, because good plays don't work and bad plays do all the time. And number 7, the last one from episode 4, is it's our job as coaches to get the best out of every player. Maybe player B is not as good as player A, but I need to make sure that I help him reach his potential however high it is. That's my job as his coach. Last episode, episode 5, I had 5 takeaways from, and the first one is don't let ego get in the way of giving our players the best coaching staff they can have. And this ties back to Sean McVay hiring Wade Phillips to be his defensive coordinator in year 1 of his tenure in Los Angeles. There was a lot said about McVay being only 30 years old. His best players like Andrew Whitworth were older than him. How is he going to be a head coach? And then what's he do? He hires a very well-respected coach in Wade Phillips, somebody else who had head coaching experience, not just coordinating experience, but head coaching experience. So if this thing fell off the wagon like Nathaniel Hackett did this past year, you had a ready in-house replacement who could at least steady the ship until we could hire another head coach. But McVay didn't care because he knew that was the best person for the job for his players. Number 2 is something we've kind of talked about already, but have a system. Don't just have plays that you like from here or there, plays that are thrown against the wall. Everything needs to work together. If you've just got a grab bag of plays, then you have a playbook, but you don't have an offense. Number 3, collaboration is key, whether it be coaches getting along with other coaches and working together, players working along with players, or coaches and players working together. Collaboration is very important when it comes to having a successful football team. Number 4 is probably one of the most important tips from this whole video, and that's that the best versions of players and coaches come from trying to get the best out of everybody else around you. If we make coaching about getting the best out of every player, and the players are trying to help get each other better, that is going to be incredible for your success, for your team building, for your culture, for your football team. And then lastly, it is not the X's and O's, it's the Jimmies and the Joes. I absolutely love the Shanahan-McVay offense, but ultimately it's up to the players to execute it, and the better the players are, the better the system is going to be. So let me know in the comments down below what you thought about the play callers. If there's any coaching points that you took away that I left out, please share them. I would love to hear them. If you want to know more about the Shanahan-McVay offense, I've created a CoachTube course on adapting it from the NFL level to the high school level. The link to that will be down in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate a like, and if you'd subscribe to my channel so you could see more videos like it. In the podcast, they talked about one play a lot, and that was Zorro. In this next video, I'm going to tell you all about it.